What's up? I'm back. In this segment, I'm going to do the video on black martial arts. And when I say black martial arts, I'm going to more focus on the mindset for the most part. I have a top 15 list. Now, this doesn't mean, you know, this is top 15 according to me, right? This is just my opinion. It's not, you don't take it for this is how it is in the whole black world. But I made this video or making this video because I think, when people hear martial arts or any type of fighting defense, they automatically always think the East, right? But all cultures, to be honest, after you learn to farm, like let's say back in the ancient days, after you learn to farm and to hunt, then you're gonna one of the next things you're gonna probably have to learn is how to defend yourself from other people who may not be able to do it as good as you. So every culture has their own martial art, and I think sometimes that gets lost, and it's unfortunate. So, obviously, with black culture, and when you look at my top 15 list, you're gonna see arts from Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and I think it's important because there's a lot of elements that's lost to black folks in general and to Latinos who don't really, Afro-Latinos, who don't really sometimes, if we're here in America or, wherever in Europe, sometimes we don't know how rich our history is. And for instance, there's a lot of people who don't even know, even in parts of Cuba and Brazil, there's people who still speak African dialects that they were speaking since slavery. That exists. Not many people know that. So when you deal with martial arts, especially in the Western Hemisphere, slavery is intertwined with it because obviously they took it from Africa, brought it here, and if you think they didn't want you worshiping your gods, well, they definitely didn't want you fighting. So a lot of times what started happening is a lot of martial arts were hidden in dancings or in celebration events or dancing, but more or kind of stick fighting that you might do in carnival time. When normally, and this is one of the reasons why I made this video too, because everyone knows capoeira. And I have to admit, when I think capoeira, when I think of the whole process of slavery and transporting martial arts, capoeira is at the top of my list. In fact, that's why it's number 2. The only art that surpassed it is an art that never was brought over here, right? So in terms of all the arts brought over here, capoeira is number 2, no question. And I think I always love the Brazilian culture because it's very rich. The African traditions stay strong over there. Even as the people mix with different cultures, the culture of Africa was very strong. And I always give Brazil props even today when it comes to that. So capoeira is definitely, the top of the list. Number 2, obviously, when you think of arts that's coming from slavery to the diaspora, capoeira is definitely at the top. But I think sometimes a lot of people in the diaspora and those looking out from the outside don't realize that what happened with capoeira, which was probably an offshoot of an art coming from Central Africa, Congo region. That same process happened in Barbados, in Trinidad, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, Colombia. It happened, just not in Brazil. And sometimes when you just think of Brazil, you're losing on all the other parts that it spread. And even traditionally in Africa that even has nothing to do with slavery. God don't want to just make it a slave thing. No question. There's arts, Dambe and Laamb, and arts coming from Kemet, ancient Egypt, that was definitely rich, and in Nigerian boxing, straight up, sometimes 2 people will come in the ring and one person doesn't leave until they die. Straight up. So when you come from that culture, you're just going to be naturally tougher and stronger. And I think part of the problem, in my opinion, and this may not be popular, part of the problems with the youth today, and we could talk about the youth today and we could talk about the spiritual community. There's 2 connected elements in a sense. The youth today, when we think sports, they don't really think real combat sports for the most part. You know what I mean? They think more basketball. Football is combat, but it's not really, honestly, football is not, it's combat, but it's a little bit different. So even though football is combat, it's not really about honor, per se. It's not really about tapping into the energy of what Mars represents, which is just an expression of the spiritual energy that created the universe. And it's a spiritual expression where you can fight for justice. You can fight for the survival of your family. You can fight for your people. You can just even exercise and just honor movement. As movement in the ancient days was considered a way to kind of keep death off of you, right? So, for me, the main thing a lot of times, there's a lot of things you could talk about the youth, but I definitely do think, though, that martial arts being extracted from education in general. We go to gym, we play basketball, we play baseball, we get track, but I think there's a spiritual element that's missing. And I know some people will say, well, I'm going to get to the spiritual community next. They're going to say, well, martial arts is violent and stuff like that. And, what's the spirituality in that? The problem is with most people is they think in a very fragmented, point of view. So they think either science, they think either art, they think either sports, they think either business. They can't really put things together. And unfortunately for the spiritual community, they don't understand that if the spiritual world gave birth to everything, if you're going to say the world's an illusion, well, you're supposed to master it like how somebody masters a video game, honestly. So it never supposed to be you're spiritual and you can't connect to the physical. In fact, when you're really spiritual, you could connect to the physical like that. You could connect to it so well, that's why you say, you know what, I want to do something else. So for me, a lot of times when you see this culture that is amongst the youth of all races, right, there's a lack of honor. There's a lack of respect. In the martial arts, you respect your teacher. You respect your elders. You respect people who have practiced the craft before you. Sports now, you see people argue about Michael Jordan is better than LeBron James. Kobe Bryant thought that for a while too, and he kind of doesn't think that anymore, but he thought that for a while too. There's a lack of respect that a lot of the sports, in my opinion, today have. And to me, males, especially males and boys, would do a lot better in school, would be a lot more disciplined if martial arts takes its rightful place back where it's supposed to. Because things like justice, honor, family, love of your tribe, that's very important. And a lot of times, that just gets lost in present athletics today. And, unfortunately, present athletics today, people don't even want to accept the connection between martial arts and the spiritual arts. The other arts, boxing, basketball, football, golf, if you don't want to accept the connection between the spirit and martial arts, I know you're not going to want to accept the connection between traditional mainstream sports and the spirit. So I think martial arts is a good bridge. So I definitely think the spiritual community is lacking that, to be honest. Now, when you come to the subject of black martial arts, it's interesting because I think sometimes why it's very hard for people to understand this, because we could get into the whole bunch of stuff. The establishment doesn't, want to give credit to, obviously black martial arts, which is definitely true. But a large part of it, though, black martial arts is not really something that you can, African martial arts, it's not really something that you can just say, let me look up in the book and do. So that's why sometimes you see a whole bunch of people do these lists, to be honest. I'm not the first person to do it. You see a whole bunch of people do these lists. Doesn't really mean anything, though. Because you have to, because see, to me, the one thing that separates African or black descendant martial arts from all other martial arts, from other cultures, it's not that it's better. Because I don't really get into that stuff, to be honest. And in fact, if you're a real warrior, you take from everyone, to be honest. See, that's the difference between when you look at my videos, when it comes to this type of stuff, I don't get into martial arts came from Africa. I don't get into that. Right? All cultures would naturally develop their own fighting arts. The difference is, in Africa, it's the origin of humanity. So if it's the origin of humanity, it makes sense that it will be the birthplace of the first martial arts or the first fighting systems. It's a difference. But for me to say that everyone else never created their own stuff, I can't say that. You could if you want, but I can't say that. And it's not just I can't say it, even if it was true. It kind of creates, because this is Mars. This is a different level, right? This is not scholars. This is not, Mercury, intellectualism, Venus, art form. It's none of that. In the end of the day, when it comes to Mars, whoever is the strongest is the most Mars, right? So for me, even if that was true, that gets into, well, I'm only going to learn this particular style, right? That comes from my people, which is suicide. That's insane and that's stupid. And even if you think that's how you want to conduct yourself, that's not Mars. In the end of the day, straight up, like, that's not Mars. So for me, first people, it's natural they develop the first martial arts, but everyone else on their continents obviously would have developed theirs too. Now, African martial arts is interesting to break down because, to me, the one thing that distinguishes it from its fighting system from other cultures is it's heavily mixed with dance, with the spirit, with keeping traditions of your culture, your tribe. I think that's the real reason why I wanted to make this video, really. If it was just normal fighting, I mean, shoot, you could learn that from, I mean, to me, honestly, you get Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, maybe get a little boxing, you good. If it's just in terms of fighting, I wouldn't do this video. But it's really more of a symbol of what it represents. You know, in fact, that's the reason why they were able to hide it and put it in different things like dance and, you know, carnival celebrations and types of drumming and types of stick fighting. There was a reason why they did that, because it's easy, because in a sense, it basically encompasses all that. And it normally, like, think of it. In fact, in a lot of African cultures, it was a way to even get your manhood. You know, just like how the Jews had at 13 years old, the boy is considered a man. In African traditions, it was the same way. You know, you come up with 12, 13, 14 years old. You know, you go out and your uncles or the males from the tribe, they'll come out, they take you to a secret location, and they would basically teach you what it was like to be a man. One of the things they taught you how it was to be a man was introduction into these arts. So, in a sense, it was part of your whole identity. And I think, in some ways, because it's so blended with the spirit, with folk traditions, music, types of music, drumming, you know, dancing, as well as fighting, as well as historically, it represents something where the slave masters tried to get rid of it and they pushed back. You know, many people will be shocked if they knew, really, that people act like they're trendsetters when they know about capoeira, right? When they know that, man, Jamaica, Trinidad, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Venezuela, Curaçao, they all got their arts. And that's not even counting the arts that's going on in Africa, which is exploding, to be honest. The African arts have me more excited than the arts on this side of the world, right? For me, the black arts on this side of the world, oh, of course, Cuban money, can't forget that. But the black arts on this side of the world is really more of a symbol, right? But over what's going on in Africa, it's a living tradition that's still going on. Like, I don't know if we can ever resurrect the arts here the way they're supposed to outside capoeira, but in Africa, I mean, they're killing them. The Cubans would, though. I give them that. And that's why I give Cuba and Brazil a lot of props. Because in Cuba and Brazil, you know, there's elements to them that just kept that culture alive. I mean, like I said, in some of the rural areas in those countries, I mean, some people still speak the dialects they were speaking when still slaves. I mean, that, to me, that's crazy. In a good way. So a real key is understanding what this is. It's a celebration of black and Afro-Latino culture. It's not just about the arts itself. It's kind of symbolic of what they represent. And I think when you get into this whole thing of trying to understand it, maybe even want to learn one of them yourself, the first thing you should take from this is understand what it is. It was something that helped, in a sense, establish your manhood in a way that's kind of forgotten today. You know, you would sing it. You know, you would do a little pre-ritual. It would be kind of shamanistic in nature, right? You would sometimes pray in your own language or try to, right, in the African dialect, wherever it came from, whichever part it came from. You would also associate it with your identity in the New World, if you're talking about the arts of the African diaspora. And in a sense, the identity that was like made of steel, where no matter how much pressure the outside world gave you, you conquered it, and your culture, which is kind of symbolic also of your ancestors, lived on. Very interesting mindset to have, and it's a lot different than just traditionally looking at it as only a fighting art. Now, you can look at the top 15 that I have. I'm not gonna go over all of them in the video, but you can look them up, and you can. I'm sure many of you have never heard of any of them. I want to just highlight a few. I definitely, when it comes to Jailhouse Rock, it's kind of more created by African Americans. I would say, or Blacks from America. I would say Jailhouse Rock is interesting because it's often disputed. People know it exists, but I guess for some people, it stings their egos a little bit that the Blacks of America will be able to develop a fighting style that was extremely effective. Now, I would say this myself. I don't have that much experience with Jailhouse Rock myself, so I'm just looking at it from the outsider. I would say, from what I could tell, it seems, because for some people they would say, well, it was created, descendants of African arts that was kind of like from slavery, that they put it together as one art. Then other people don't like this, and they say, nah, that was invented in probably the 70s, maybe 60s, but definitely probably the 70s. And that's what my sources say. You can tell it kind of came up on the East Coast in New York around the time that hip-hop was first making a move. In fact, you could even make an argument that it's unfortunate that that was one of the elements that died out in the sense of entering the mainstream, where rap, b-boying, graffitiism, they still survived. So then they got packaged as hip-hop. But you can make an argument that that was supposed to be maybe one of the things. Now, I'm not going to say supposed to be, but it might have been interesting if that would have came on the scene the same time in hip-hop for the mainstream. And Jailhouse Rock, a lot of times from what I could tell, it was really more of a, I don't want to say a 5% thing, but in jail, there seems to be the ones who had it. And it's interesting because it's no question an effective system. It's not even a question, right? It's people say Mike Tyson was showing some of it. I mean, there's all kind of stuff associated with it, but it's no question it was a very effective art. I don't know the condition of it right now. They say Ludacris is learning some of it so he can showcase in the Fast and Furious 7. I don't know if that's just to sell the movie or whatever, or if that's real. If it is real, I give him a lot of props. But from what was known, it was definitely a deadly art, and no question. It shows the creative spark of the black energy, because, I mean, that wasn't even... If it evolved the way I think it did, where, it's one thing if you take the system from Africa and you modify it, right, which is still beautiful. You modify it with dance, you modify it with stick fighting. Yeah, it's cool if you do that. But when you could take it straight up, from nothing, from scratch, and just invent it, even though, of course, it's still the ancestors working through you, I give you a lot of props. So, no question, Jailhouse Rock, definitely something to respect, and that's why it's high up on the list. That's why it occupies the position on my list that it occupies. It's definitely respected. It's one of the few ones on the list that I've never really seen personally. So I guess look at it as an outsider. When I say never seen it personally, I don't have experience with it at all. So it's about 2 or 3 arts here that I have never experienced personally. Then there's other ones I've never practiced, but I've seen. I've seen boxing matches in Nigeria. I've seen it, but I'm talking about from this angle. No, I just look at it from its reputation, and Jailhouse Rock reputation is impressive. No question. Capoeira, I didn't want to speak about too as much because everyone's kind of spoke about it already. There's not that much to say. I mean, Capoeira is awesome art. In some ways, it represents the spirit of this video, because even though many arts in different countries under the sport have survived, Capoeira has went that much further and went into the mainstream in people's minds. So all of a sudden, whether it's, when you could say Calinda from Trinidad, Mani from Cuba, when you say Capoeira and then you say, well, hey, these evolved like Capoeira in those countries, the fact that you could say these evolved like Capoeira shows how special Capoeira it is, because everyone associates it with an art that was started with the slaves that survived, if that makes any sense. Now, the thing is about some of these arts that I think might get missed even from the people doing it. Like, if you are in Trinidad and you look at your art as just something that you do in carnival time, and that's the problem. Like, the problem with a lot of the arts and the survival, how they survived, is that most people in the countrysides who are not really as integrated into the mainstream societies of the countries that we're talking about, especially when you talk about Jamaica, because even Jamaicans art, a lot of the art that we're talking about when it comes to Jamaica was coming from the Maroons, to be honest. So in a sense, it was passed on from person to person. So you could type up on YouTube and type it up, and you're not going to see anything from that, because it's somebody, you got to know somebody to get that art, and it's probably going to be in the countryside. So in some ways, if you're in a regular Jamaican mainstream society, you may not have access to that art, or you might, but you might, if you, the part of it that you have access to, it's like what will happen in Trinidad. It'll be stick fighting and carnival, play little drums, and people associate it more with dance or art than actually the expression of Mars, which is okay. But in a lot of ways, a lot of times what's happened is that we're kind of losing that. You know, in theory, we're actually losing the art a little bit, because they were fighting arts as well. And I think the more people know about it, because one of the good things about globalization is, as we're getting so unified as a world, right, is that there'll be people who listen to this. This is the beauty about the world now. There'll be people listening to this, and they'll go to those islands and search them out. And that's actually how the arts stay alive. So that's one of my purposes in this video, is for a few things. First, to kind of break that spookism that everything dealing with martial arts has come from the East only, when all cultures had it. And the African culture is rich because the first people on earth. So the martial arts traditions of the continent, or the wrestling traditions, or the boxing traditions, because I'm labeling all of them in the same arts of Mars, will be rich and should be explored and should be remembered. Because what I really don't want is for the arts to die out. Because like I said, you could get a lot of people. You're not going to get a Brazilian that doesn't know, not Capoeira, right? They know it. They may not practice it, but they know what it is. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, Cubans, no, you might get a lot of Cubans who don't know what money is either. I'm have to be honest. Cubans, Venezuelans, Trinidadians, Jamaicans, Haitians, no, you get a lot of them who don't know those arts. When it comes to the ancient arts from Kemet, I expect people not to do that, because they're up for this. They're up for debate. You know, some people say they exist. Some people they say they don't exist. You know, it's very controversial, and I can see why. Like I said, it rubs people's egos wrong. You know, when you're dealing with arts from Kemet or Egypt, for sure. So when you deal with Kuta, like with the Egyptian art Kuta, right? It's interesting because it's not really a traditional martial art per se. It deals more with reflexes, and basically it has two straight punches. Basically, that's it. It's kind of like, you could look at it as boxing, but it deals a lot with reflexes. So for me, when I look at it, the deadliness in the art is the simplicity and how natural it is, where a lot of other martial arts is really going against things that you naturally do. Of course, if you do them, more power to you. It's very effective. But Kuta is just one of those things that everyone has reflexes for the most part, and it just teaches you to kind of work with your own reflexes and the reflexes of others, and you just have two simple punches. Now, I'm not a Kuta practitioner, but as a boxer, I can see, I mean, there's no question, I can see why it'll be effective. And Kuta in general was thought to be the martial art that the Egyptian bodyguards, some people say the Nubians were the best soldiers. I'm not sure if it's a Nubian art or Egyptian art, but the Egyptian bodyguards would had or they practiced. And as Egypt got overrun, a lot of people went to the east and took it to the east, and then started bodyguarding the Asian rulers, who kept this knowledge in secret until recently. Now, you know, some people are not gonna like that, but for the most part, this is what I always say, and this is even the purpose of this video. Another purpose of this video as well. What people of African descent have to realize, let other people say that your culture is not, especially when they deal with Mars. Like, if you want to get into history, and all this other type of stuff, debate it. No question. I say debate it because It's injustice what's being done historically and stuff like that. So when you see Moses, like movies like a Moses, and everyone in Egypt is white, probably that's not accurate, obviously. So if you want to debate that, cool. But if a person wants to come and try to debate you in Mars, and they want to come and try to say, well, this is not this is not that, I'm like, what you should do is you practice the art as a person of African descent, or a person who may not be African descent but are interested in the arts, right? You practice the art, and then you just say, hey man, if you want to doubt the existence of this art, try running up on me and see what happens. That's it. Because that's what Mars is about. It's action. It's not the talk. The talk is for the other planetary powers. When you deal with Mars, it's action. So one of the things I want people of African descent, or people who love black culture, or people who love maybe unique martial arts to understand is a lot of times black culture gets packaged, right? It gets packaged as one thing, right? Of course, there was slavery. But there are also Moors who came on here on their own. There are also descendants in the West Africans who became Olmecs who came here on their own. Like, the culture is so diverse, right? You have West Africa, Central Africa, but you have other parts of Africa. I mean, honestly, you got descendants of Africans who may not be slaves who went, the first Australians, then they went to the Philippines. They went to many different lands that you wouldn't associate with blackness. So what I want a lot of people watching this video to understand is that when we talk about martial arts and we talk about it from the black perspective, and you look at this list, you see 15 arts, and I could have went more, but I don't want to put arts that have, that I just, I don't know about, right? So I like to do with arts that I like to present arts that either I know someone else who knows it, or connected to it culturally, right? So there's other arts, but these are the 15 I have the most knowledge of. Now, I want the person to look at this and to say, wow, there's 15 arts. I only know Capoeira. I got to pick my game up. Because what happens is that actually tells the person, even if you black, there's a lot of things about black culture and the surviving elements that you may not know, if that makes any sense. And you should go out there and try to find it out and try to absorb it, try to keep it alive. So Kuta is interesting because no question it exists. the British, there's elements of the British military, he used it. But I know a lot of egotistical people who, there is some truth to it. Some people just don't really want to see African culture get any love. So they would say it doesn't exist. And I think probably because once you say they're the bodyguards in the East, it might light some of their egos up too, because then it's like, wow, if we were the bodyguards of your rulers, what does that mean? It means we were pretty tough. And it's interesting because it's not really a complex system, so that makes it even more like, could poke your ego a little bit. But it definitely exists. And in a sense, it's one of those things where, for the most part, like Jailhouse Rock, to me, it being brought to light in a greater society will only benefit it, because it's not just for the style itself, it's for what it represents. Because there's a big problem in the spiritual community, because even when a person repackages some of these arts and presents it, they don't really live the art. And when I say live the art, it doesn't even mean do the art. They don't live the art of Mars. They don't live the art of action. Self-defense is not that much to them, to be honest. And the thing about martial arts is not, martial arts originally existed to be a healing system. Believe it or not, the healers were the first martial artists. Shamans, the medicine men. Because, you have to have the body movement to have certain energy movement. To move certain energy, you need movement. Right? So it was natural that some people would develop poses and forms and moves. And then other people modified it and said, wow, I could actually channel this energy and use it to defend myself. That's actually how it came. So it really is spirituality, just spirituality that's moving. And it's just spirituality that you can use to defend yourself if needed. That's the difference. So Kuta is interesting because it's so simple, but it's so lethal if it's done right. So next up, a little bit Nuba wrestling, coming from Sudan. I'm not going to really say that much about it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, the East Africans and the Sudanese were incredible wrestlers. Still are. still practiced. And in some ways, for some people, they say this is the oldest art. And I do know the Nubians, they were incredible warriors. So I wouldn't doubt it, for sure. Wrestling, I think, is important, like boxing. It's important because I think what the rise of MMA has done, it's shown people that it's really more about taking what works for you and don't get into the dogma of one style, to be honest. Yes, if you're fighting, probably going to be boxing for the most part if you find someone you don't know, but, or not that you don't know, but maybe find someone that skills. But, I mean, it might go on the floor. If it might go on the floor, things like jiu-jitsu and wrestling might actually work. Or people just not used to go on the floor. So if you got to, I don't know if you're in the concrete, if you're going to wrestle on the ground, but if you're in the side of the building, a little bit, the floor is not as hard, why not? People can't really, they're not used to that, they're not expecting that. That's why it's deadly wrestling, like, fighting a wrestler if you never wrestled before. So I do think Nuba wrestling and Laamb wrestling from Senegal, which is now like a big time sport in West Africa, it's very important. And those are especially Laamb, those are living arts that still exist. I mean, a lot of people in Senegal at this moment, they're interested in getting in the MMA scene. So there's a lot of elements going to Senegal trying to introduce jiu-jitsu to them, because if they introduce, the thought process is if they introduce jiu-jitsu to them, they already know wrestling. So they'll be able to come into the MMA world, and who knows, maybe able to start to feed their family. The thing I like about the MMA world, even though they're missing a lot of the spiritual elements, they still kind of got the base understanding of what Mars is. You could look at an MMA fighter sometimes, and you would never think that person's a fighter, and then you fight them, you be in for the shock of your life. I think one thing people miss of what Mars is Mars makes you, believe it or not, if it's healthy, right, makes you a better person. A lot of times fear overrides us sometimes, especially as a male. You just get, a male who doesn't know how to fight just sometimes gets scared, gets intimidated when they shouldn't be. I love boxing, but I do admit, if someone is stronger than you might not be able to outbox them. The beautiful thing about martial arts is it will work on somebody stronger than you. So even when I said earlier in the video, he who's strongest survives in Mars, usually that could be true, but usually he who's the most skilled survives in the arts of Mars, combat sports of Mars. So I definitely think when you look at this video, understand it's not about, even when you see these lists, it's not even about someone from Kuta saying, hey man, you put out stuff at 13, and a Haitian saying, hey, you put out stuff at 7. It's not really about that. It's really about, first, understanding the symbolism of what all these arts mean, number one. And then number two, if you are lucky enough to study 2 or 3 of them, take what you can from them that will work for you. And if you're a person, and honestly, besides even the whole Mars and fighting, look at Mani in Cuba. In Cuba, or Cuba, however you want to say it, Mani is interesting because it's pride. It's a fighting art, but it's also a folk art. You do it with your cousins and your family, and maybe your town that you're from, and it's a kind of a way for the whole community to express themselves. So even if you're a person who's not into fighting, look at these arts as arts. It's called martial arts for a reason. It's an art form. And to me, honestly, it's more important that these arts live on than you actually take them and start fighting with it. Because like I said, if you really want to be a badass, you could just do Muay Thai, boxing, and maybe one type of wrestling, maybe wrestling, or probably better yet, jiu-jitsu, and you good. You'll be able to beat most people. Or if you take it one up, you want to go to Krav Maga, you could do that too. That's actually probably better. So it's not just about fighting, but it's about understanding what this means. There's a lot of descendants, there's a lot of people in the African diaspora who don't know that in parts of Cuba and Brazil, there's people who are speaking the dialects they were speaking of since they were slaves. Or if they didn't, they relearned it because the culture was that strong that they'll make a pilgrimage to Africa and relearn the arts. The language, right? The religions are just as strong, believe it, as they always were. Yes, people look at the hybrid forms like in Candomblé and Santeria, but what people don't really realize is no, they actually, even in Cuba and Brazil and some other places, in Haiti, yeah, there's people who still practice the raw form, or if they don't, they may practice the form of certain spiritual systems that that same, some elements of it don't even exist anymore because the whole tribes were taken and brought on the ship, or elements of the whole village, not tribes, but the whole villages will be taken and brought on the ships. So the symbolism of what it means is extremely important, and it's very easy for people to miss out on it. So when you look at this art or this video, it's not just taking the art and saying you're a badass or black people invented martial arts. It's understanding the symbolism of what it means. Understanding how, when you look at how maybe society's evolving, how masculinity in society is evolving, and you look and you see, you know, people consider Mars like football and basketball, which are sports, but there's no honor in them in the same way. Honor is not the same as it is now. And these arts that I'm presenting, there's a difference. Because when you fight, you know, like, that's why sometimes I get frustrated when I see people make this list and it becomes all political. Because if you're a fighting guy, you're a fighting guy. If you're a freaking dude from Bosnia against a dude from Nigeria, against a dude from Haiti, against a dude from Nicaragua, if you could fight, you could fight. You respect that. Because if you don't, if a guy could fight better than you, he knock you out or worse. If that makes any sense. So it's important to understand what it means, to understand the uniqueness of these arts, was that while people may look at a lot of Asiatic arts or the traditional MMA or Krav Maga, for God's sake, and say, this is too violent, we can't do this. The beautiful thing about these arts is that they're art. They're art. So much so that they will fuse the music. So even if you're not a martial art person, you can look at these arts and appreciate it when you see people dancing or fighting with sticks or pretending to fight with sticks and doing it in an entertaining form. It's beyond, that's the difference. It's beyond traditional, I'm just going to kill you. Now, I'm not going to lie, you know, you look at the Nigerian boxing, yeah, I mean, no question, you know, they might kill you. Like, you know, not anymore, but back in the days was like that. So to me, the beautiful thing about these systems are what they represent. If you're a person who's scared of violence and assault but like art forms, you like it too. If you're a person who loves your culture, right? And wherever you love African culture, whether it's African culture in Haiti, in Jamaica, in Cuba, and in America, and you love it and you want to preserve it, and you learn it, you learn one, you learn two, and then a person says, I don't believe Kuta exists, I don't believe Jailhouse Rock exists, I don't believe this exists, I believe the arts in Jamaica are dead. You learn it, you become that, you become one with the spirit of it. Then you say, well, you know, if you don't believe it exists, test me. That's how what real men would do. Say the intellectuals, the people who get into politics, they could debate all the other stuff. But before you debate it, first we gotta make sure the arts are still alive. You know, 10 or 12 of these arts, you could type up on YouTube, you get nothing. If that makes any sense. Like, you want to make sure and preserve them first. So hope this helps. Till next time. Peace.